With an active sovereign portfolio of $82.2 billion and 666 projects spanning all sectors, it is very important that we drill deeper into portfolio indicators and use this forum to discuss our findings and resolve to take forward the lessons that we learn.
In a couple of years, maybe a decade and a half, we'll all be living in urban centers. The way forward must be to plan new cities properly, make them smarter, greener, more resilient, but at the same time also allow for existing cities to be renewed.
The first, deepen the understanding on the linkage between project readiness and implementation performance. Second, enhance the knowledge on sector-specific challenges and the application of the countermeasures during project design and implementation. And the third, emphasize the importance of robust developing member country policies.
A solid project design where planning and design are reverse engineered, which means we start with how the project is expected to be managed, maintained, and sustained. The elements and then process that support the end goal are then integrated in the project design at the beginning.
Policy dialogue with countries. In ADB jargon, we call them country programming mission. This is, if done well, this is an opportunity, a venue for discussion. And I observe that even government looks at this as a way to get their line agencies together with them and look at how projects learn lessons from previous projects. Also try to see if there are things that can be improved. And from the ADB side, first of all, to listen and see how things can be done and change.
When it comes to project preparation, we've really learned the hard way that it's almost essential to complete detailed design before we go for financing approval. And essentially, in the Pacific, it's in everybody's interest to ensure that projects are shovel-ready once the financing is ready. And again, we do have some new instruments and facilities here at ADB, and we've taken quite a bit of advantage of the new project readiness financing facility, which enables us to finance work through detailed design.
Plan. Figure out your critical path. Critical path is where you put what could be delayed. You just map it all up.
Safeguards really has to be one of the cornerstones of our development projects. It's about making sure that we do the right thing. And I think for ADB, to say from my side as the Director for Safeguards, it is something that we're fully committed to.
Why does ADB invest in gender equality? Because we're interested in development, as I just mentioned. We are interested in obviously having a talented human capital pool, and we're seeing that across our country, despite ADB's been here for over 50 years, we're still seeing a lot of gender gaps.
Will our investment lock us in to future climate change issues?
Projects in technology are different than infrastructure.
If we design our projects appropriately with sustainability in mind, then we will not be a drain on public finances. So while we look at the oversight aspect, the money actually gets where it's going, the other aspect of what we look at and what is our fiduciary responsibility is to ensure that we don't in turn develop projects or make investments that end up, once we leave, that are burden on the country itself.
Moving forward and to help us to achieve more, please also do your share in putting in place of enabling policies, institutions, and mechanisms to allow our support to be more efficient and effective.
Now on its 6th year, the Forum on Successful Project Design and Implementation is happening fully virtual this year. Government representatives are connected online from various parts of Asia and the Pacific. ADB staff and participants from the development community are also online. Organized by ADB's Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Department, the forum seeks to enhance the institutional capacity of executing and implementing agencies in developing member countries. In this forum, we want to broaden our knowledge and improve our approaches in project design and implementation. We learn the guidelines for mitigating project risks during the COVID pandemic. And we also discuss approaches in rebuilding project momentum. The experience of frontliners and cases from the field broaden our options for operating under the new normal. Most important, we learn together and learn from each other in rising to the challenge of COVID-19 and beyond. Post your thoughts in social media. Use the hashtags #RiseBeyondCovid, ADBOps. Learn from experts and people in field. Ask questions, share views, and join the game. Finally, meet new friends and connect with counterparts in other countries. Stay safe and stay engaged at successfulprojects.adb.org.
Welcome to the session, Rebuilding the Momentum, Project Implementation, and Stakeholder Engagement. Our facilitator for this discussion is Marzia Mongiorgi, the Principal Country Specialist of the PRC Resident Mission. Ms. Mongiorgi, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the session, Rebuilding the Momentum, Project Implementation and Stakeholder Engagement. I am Marzia Mongiorgi from ADB office in Beijing, and I will be your facilitator this morning. Thank you for joining this live session, and thank you for those of you who are watching the recording. In the first day of the forum, ADB's President Maza stressed that project management units cannot operate in an as business as usual environment in light of the pandemic. And he offered 3 short-term measures to adapt to the pandemic. He mentioned that we should consider mid-course restructuring for those projects with issues caused by the pandemic. We should cancel potential loss saving if available early so that the funds can be repurposed for COVID-19 interventions. And use of virtual project team meetings and review missions should be done to the fullest because of travel restrictions. Also, in the opening session, an interesting poll was conducted to ask participants 3 things that come to mind when we hear the word new normal. The results were highly related to these sessions and included health and safety protocol, changes in policies and processes, extensive use of information and communications technology. These 3 subjects are exactly the content of our presentations and panel discussion this morning. In fact, we will present you what ADB has done for updating the environment and social safeguards implementation guidelines during the COVID pandemic. And we will share with you real-life experiences on project management during the pandemic to keep momentum for project implementation and project processing as well, including capitalizing on technology opportunities. We have an exciting event ahead of us for you. We will have presentations, videos, and panel discussion. Let me now introduce you the speakers and the panelists. We will have Ms. Karma Yangzon. She is the Principal Environment Specialist for ADB Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. She has extensive experience in preparing and implementing environment safeguards, especially in South Asian countries. The second speaker will be Mr. Deepak Bahadur Singh. He is the Senior Environment Officer in ADB's Nepal Resident Mission, from where he leads the safeguards teams of the South Asia Regional Department in project processing and implementation. He brings 30 years of experience as a hydropower and environment engineer in the government-owned Nepal Electricity Authority. Ms. Lakshmi Panta is the Safeguard Unit Chief and Procurement Management of the Project Implementation Directorate of the Kathmandu Upatyaka Kanepani Limited in Nepal. She has extensive experience with ADB projects and an engineer in a private consulting firm. The next speaker will be Mr. Manoj Silwal. He currently holds the senior position as the Deputy Management Director of the Nepal Electricity Authority, which is the focal agency of the government of Nepal for planning and developing energy projects in various areas of energy. He leads the Project Management Directorate established for management of ADB-funded projects. We will have also Chandam Kumar Ghosh, the Project Manager of the Project Management Directorate of the Nepal Electricity Authority. He is the project management for the Kalingataki Transmission Corridor project, and he brings 20 years of professional service in the authority. We will then have Mr. Ricky Carlos Barba, who is the Safeguard Specialist for ADB South Asian Department. He has been with ADB since 1996 and brings extensive experience in processing and in implementing ADB's projects, both from HQ in Manila and Cambodia Resident Mission. The last but not the least, Steven Skipani is the Project Administration Unit Head at ADB Vietnam Resident Mission. He manages a wide portfolio of public investments in various sectors, and he's also ADB's tourism sector focal point for the Greater Mekong sub-region. I will then call the first presenter, Ms. Karma. Over to you.
Thank you, Marcia. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me properly. So I will be presenting the draft guidance note on safeguards implementation during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the draft document, and we have already shared it with the operational departments, the safeguard staff of the operational departments, and we've already received feedback. And currently we are in the process of incorporating the feedback and revising the guidance note. Next slide, please. Yes. So the flow of my presentation actually follows the flow of the different sections in the guidance note itself. So in a way, it's a sample of the guidance note that I'm presenting here. So we begin the guidance note by providing a brief background on why this guidance note is required. As we all know, because of the pandemic, we had to suddenly change the way we do our work, and ADB headquarters got closed, and even as of now, only 10% of staff in Manila are working from headquarters, and still many resident missions are closed and staff are working from home. International travel, as we all know, is highly restricted, and in some countries, even national and local travel is restricted. So this is sort of understanding the challenges and change in situation. So that is the sort of setting the stage on why we need this guidance note. Next slide, please. And within the guidance note, we focus on the main challenge areas. So because of all these the change in situation where we cannot travel, we cannot have face-to-face consultations. It is very challenging to prepare as well as implement our projects, and especially safeguards. So amongst the different safeguard principles, the areas which are challenged the most, this is based on feedback from operational departments. This is the public consultation and grievance redress mechanism. Obviously, this is challenged because we cannot, in many cases, we cannot have face-to-face consultations or organize big, group meetings. Site visits for project review, as well as data collection for preparing safeguards assessment is also a big challenge. Information disclosure in terms of disclosing project information to project affected people, project stakeholders. This has become a challenge, and even preparing and disclosing monitoring reports, safeguards monitoring reports, that is also a challenge. So these are the main challenge areas that we have found within safeguards. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the guidance note is mainly to serve as an internal guidance for ADB staff. And we suggest that the relevant ADB safeguard staff share the requirements of this guidance note with their counterpart executing agencies and implementing agencies. The guidance note covers all 3 safeguard areas, including environment, indigenous people, resettlement, involuntary resettlement, and it covers projects under preparation as well as implementation. The purpose of the guidance note is mainly to take stock and understand the ongoing challenges, and then based on that, try to provide some solutions or options to help meet the safeguard policy requirements. Clarify the requirements for documentation needs, especially for projects under processing. And most importantly, to encourage innovation and use alternate methods of achieving safeguards compliance. And I think this is something which we can learn a lot from, and we can actually, going forward, when we go back to our new normal, we can actually carry a lot of the lessons and perhaps find ways to do our work in a more efficient way. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overall ADB safeguard policy statement and the OMs, so basically this is still applicable to all ADB projects, both under processing as well as under implementation, though we are in this challenging situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's still applicable. However, alternate methods of compliance may be used to comply with the safeguard requirements. And this can be done through, using alternate methods, adjustments in the project planning and design, which I will talk a little bit more about later. All national and local policies, as under normal situations, will be applicable, particularly in relation to the 3 safeguard areas of environment, IR, and IP. And of course, all the COVID-19 related national and local regulations must be followed in preparing and implementing projects. Next slide, please. So basically, the main message from my earlier slide is that there will be no waivers. The SPS is still fully applicable. Now, this is quite an important slide. So this is the main, actually, gist of the guidance note, that we should follow a risk-based approach in terms of, making a decision on whether we should proceed with, the project, or whether we should wait. And the risks are similar for both projects under preparation and are under implementation. So I have like this common line of boxes in the middle. And after getting feedback from operational departments and reviewing some of the projects that we have received for review, which are under processing, we have sort of broadly categorized the different kinds of project into these 5 categories shown in these 5 boxes. So the first is all projects, including those projects that are classified as highly complex and sensitive. Now, I think we all know this is the one where we tick the box which says highly complex and sensitive in the categorization form. So those kind of projects and all other projects which are able to carry out project preparation and implementation like normal times. Then this is, of course, obviously no need to wait or make any extra effort. This can just proceed. If it's a project under preparation, you can proceed as normal. If it's a project under implementation, you can proceed as normal. And this is we are stating this because we know that there are a couple of countries and resident missions where there are no lockdowns and people are able to go about and do their business almost as normal. So it is for those kind of cases. Now, in the second box, there are projects that have a medium to high risk and projects that are classified as highly complex and sensitive that are not able to use normal methods nor alternative methods for achieving safeguards compliance. For example, you are unable to carry out public consultation, face-to-face. That is not possible. And you are also not able to carry out public consultations through using, video con or telecon or WhatsApp. So even virtual media or IT, you are unable to do that, properly. So then in that case, of course, it's very risky and you will not be able to comply with the SPS requirement, particularly on the requirement on meaningful consultation. So in that situation, then the arrow goes to the left, which says if it's a project under preparation, then we suggest that the project be kept on hold. Because, if you kind of force your way through, then you may end up having a lot of problems and mess to clear up later on during the project implementation stage. So we suggest that the project be kept on hold if it's a project under preparation. And if it's a project under implementation, we also recommend that you sort of postpone or keep on hold the project implementation of the project and safeguards. So here, I think in the slide, it says implementation of safeguards until new normal methods of review can be followed. So we mean safeguards as well as the project implementation. And I know this is a little bit nuanced, so I will clarify and explain that a little bit more after I go through all the boxes in the middle. So the third category of projects, projects that have medium and high risk and classified as highly complex and sensitive that are able to use alternate methods and adjust safeguard activity timeline where there is a clear identification of risk and feasible risk mitigation measures. So in such case, then yes, we recommend that the project proceed with preparation, proceed with implementation. So if you have a project where you are able to reach out to all the stakeholders, you are able to, through the support of your national consultant, you are able to reach out to all the affected people, or at least, the main representative of the affected people. You are able to get their feedback and incorporate it in project design. You are able to talk to all the, government stakeholders or NGOs through virtual meetings, and you're able to get a good idea of the feedback of the stakeholders and incorporate their concerns in project design. Even though you are not able to meet them face to face, then you have enough information, to be incorporated in project design. So this is an example. Then in such kind of situation, we recommend that you can go ahead with, project preparation and project implementation. Now, the fourth box, so projects with medium to high risk, and highly complex and sensitive, where you have tried using alternative methods and you have also tried to adjust the project design and the timeline, but still it's a little bit not clear. You are not able to get a good idea of the risks, and a lot of important information of the project site is missing, and there is some doubt. In such kind of situation, we suggest again that you pointing the arrow to the left box again, where we keep projects on hold. And this could be, for example, for a project where you're working with an EA for the first time, and you have no idea about the performance of the EA. And if it's going to be like an category A for environment or category A for resettlement or both, it's got these sensitive issues. but you don't have a clear idea on how well the EA is going to implement the requirements, then it might be risky and it may bring problems later on down the project line. So in that kind of situation, then we suggest that you keep the project on hold. And of course, the last box is straightforward. For low-risk projects, then of course, we recommend that you proceed with preparation and implementation. Now, to go back to the projects under implementation, keeping that on hold. So this is a little bit nuanced. We suggest that for projects which are, have complex issues, and so again, this is like you really need to gauge the project situation. So say you have a project where there is a lot of land acquisition and you have the contractor who is just, getting on with the bulldozer and trying to clear the land, and he wants to really finish his work and perhaps earn that bonus that some contractors earn when they finish their work early before the construction period end date. He could just go ahead and bulldoze and construct, and say you are not able to pay the compensation to the affected people, and people are just being moved out of the area without proper compensation payment. So then that is a risky situation. And in that kind of situation, if you are unable to go and check the site, if you're unable to gauge a good idea of what's going on in the field, then we suggest that you keep the project on hold and safeguards implementation on hold. However, there could be other projects. For example, say it's a road construction project, and then there are some very simple activities such as constructing a fence or constructing, let's say, the housing for the road maintenance works, housing facility. So I know there are sometimes these other additional small components added to the road construction project. And these are very small activities which are taking place, but major works such as the actual blacktopping of the road or constructing the foundation of the road, like the big works cannot take place because of lack of workers, and because the international technical engineers and experts cannot come into the country. So there could be a host of reasons. In such kind of situation where there are just these simple low risk activities going ahead, then we suggest that yes, you could go ahead with these activities, and safeguards, you do your best, but the safeguard risk will be low in this case. So I hope I'm being clear, but this is a little bit to explain how it's not so straightforward. It's a little bit nuanced. Next slide, please. So the risk criteria, and actually in the guidance note, we have quite an elaborate sort of ranking system. And here I've simplified it in this slide, where we need to consider a wide range of criteria. And this is not an exhaustive list. So some of the things that we can look into is, like I had mentioned before, the capacity of the borrower or the EA. How did they perform in earlier projects? Particularly, if there were sensitive safeguard issues, did they perform well? Or is it an EA that we are working with for the first time and we don't know how they will do? And we need to spend more time and energy in building their capacity. Another risk area is the scale and sensitivity of safeguard impacts. If it is, a project which is going through or near a protected area, let's say, then that is highly sensitive. If there are, a huge number of people to be resettled, then that is also sensitive. So the risk would naturally increase for such kind of projects. Ability to carry out meaningful consultations, and just to clarify, according to the SPS, meaningful consultations refers to the timing where we should carry out the consultation early on during project preparation and throughout the project preparation and implementation stage, where we are able to engage with all kinds of stakeholders, women, men, elderly, differently abled people. So all groups of people must be included in the consultations. We should be able to communicate in the language which is understandable to them. We should be able to let them, speak up freely and share their views freely. And we should be able to hear their concerns and be able to incorporated in the project design. So that's the definition of meaning consultation according to the SPS. Another challenge is, another high risk is with regard to legacy issues. There could be projects that, or particular areas or countries where there is known to be a lot of compliance, non-compliances, or also in terms of the people being very outspoken and sensitive and filing complaints. So these kind of projects, the risk would be much higher, so we would need to be careful. So I think I won't go through all of them one by one, or else I'll run out of time. So basically, the main message is that the risk rating and the assessment must be very comprehensive. Next slide, please. So now to go on to the key challenge areas that I had talked about earlier. So one of the main challenge areas that we see is obviously carrying out site visits and collecting data for which is required for the safeguard assessments. So for preparing the resettlement plans, for preparing the environmental assessments, the indigenous peoples plan, it's very hard to get the information and to carry out a proper assessment because of these challenges. So in the guidance note, we have provided an appendix with the list of recommended alternate methods. Where obviously one of the main alternate method is to use virtual platforms and online tools and information sources. And in cases where some kind of local travel is allowed, we recommend that strict COVID-19 safety protocols be followed. And there can be adjustments in the consultant inputs where you delegate more responsibility to the national consultants. For this now, again, this is for cases where local travel is possible. So give more responsibility to the national consultants, and then have a system where the information can be collected in the form of photographs, videos, and then you provide that information back to your international counterpart for cases where there is an international consultant also in the team, and then they can analyze the data later. In some cases where even local travel is not possible, like from one province to another or from one district to another, then we suggest that if there are any local organizations that are based in or near the project site, that you engage them. There could be some community-based groups or local organizations that might be quite resourceful in providing information for the project. And then we also, this adjustment in project preparation and implementation, so this is with regard to making adjustments within the project planning. So it could be that we are able to get some level of field data, which is enough to give us a good idea on the level of risk and the level of impacts. But then it could be that there needs to be some more, verification later on. So that verification, and say this is an EIA report, it could be the finalization of the EIA report could be shifted to post-project approval. So after board approval, then you could have a set of activities which could be done after project approval. And if there are some projects which are really high risk and it is tricky, then of course, STSS is there. You can reach out to us and we can do our best to help you. Next slide, please. So again, public consultation. Again, I will not get too much into detail. I think I've already given a lot of examples on public consultation where we recommend that use of ICT and virtual media and maximize the use of local consultant services. These are the main recommendations. Next slide, please. Information disclosure. So now this is something which we do anyway under normal circumstances, where we share project information through the local media. We distribute project leaflets on the project, installing signboards with... with information on the project and sort of the focal points of if anyone has grievances, who they should contact within the project team. So these are things which we do anyway under normal circumstances. So it's just sort of continuing with that and more, with more options. So we also have an appendix which provides some recommendations for this. Next slide, please. Staff participation in missions. This is one of the main concerns which came as feedback from operational departments. So obviously, a lot of staff cannot travel. So what are the options that we have? If there are resident missions that are open and where resident mission staff that can travel, then we suggest that the respective HQ staff coordinate with their colleagues in RM and ask the RM staff to participate in the site visits and field mission, sort of field review site visits on behalf of the HQ staff. And if that cannot take place, then we recommend that you hire staff consultants who can represent the HQ staff or the RM staff and carry out the site review or even represent ADB staff in the public consultations. And I think this is a concern because specifically in the OM, there is a requirement for ADB staff to participate in the public consultations, particularly in projects where the safeguard category for either environment, IR, or IP is A. And even staff to participate in projects where these projects under implementation. So there is a requirement for staff to carry out review missions in person. Not in person, but carry out review missions for category A projects. So if nothing works out, then it is okay for the RM or for the HQ division to hire a staff consultant. So the main thing is it needs to be a staff consultant. It cannot be a consultant which is hired by the EA. It cannot be somebody from the supervision consultants team, or it cannot be a TA consultant, who from a TA, which is actually the purpose of the TA is actually to support project processing. So the guidance that we received is that it has to be a staff consultant. Next slide, please. So documentation, this is very, very important. So all the risk assessments, they need to be clearly documented, obviously in the safeguard assessment reports. If there are projects that have used alternate methods of compliance. So we suggest that these be clearly documented in the safeguard assessment reports, and the risks that are related to using these alternate methods and how they have been mitigated. And also in the RRP, there is the risk assessment and management plan section in the RRP. So we suggest that you clearly document the safeguard related risks in that section or in the safeguard section or any other section within the RRP. In the project administration manual, the PAM or the FAM for MFFs, for projects where certain safeguard activities have been postponed to post-project approval stage, we suggest that you clearly document what are the follow-up activities that need to be carried out after board approval. Say there needs to be some kind of final field verification for the resettlement plan or for the EIA report. Who is going to carry out those activities? What are the resources required? When do they need to be carried out? So these need to be clearly written down in the PAM. And then the SPCM, this is a Safeguard Policy Compliance Memo, which is issued for Category A projects by SDSS and for Category B and C by the respective operational divisions. So even in the SPCM, it must be clearly documented, similar to what I mentioned for the PAM, in terms of what are the pending actions that need to be done after the MRM or after the board approval. And then it could be that in some cases, you also may need to put some clauses, additional clauses in the loan agreement, especially if there are highly sensitive safeguard issues and you require the EA to carry out certain critical activities after board approval. So then it could be that you would need to put some clauses in the loan agreement. And of course, this would need to be, a decision would need to be made on this in discussion with OGC, our lawyers department. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 health and safety, this is a big concern for ADB staff and consultants. And here I'm mentioning only staff and consultants because there are already other guidance notes that have been issued for the project level health and safety. And this has been, 2 guidance notes have already been issued. One is for our executing agencies and implementing agencies. And another one is an internal document which was jointly issued together with our procurement department to guide project preparation and implementation. And this is especially with regard to preventing the spread of COVID-19, let's say inside construction camps or in the project sites. So for carrying out the safeguard assessments and safeguard review activities, we suggest that everybody follows the international best practices, comply with national and local regulations, and have clear COVID-19 health and safety protocols, and basically have a dynamic system to assess the risks and carry out site visits and really see if it's worth the risk. And if anyone is not comfortable going to the site because they are not sure how safe it's going to be, then we recommend that no one should be forced to go to the site. Next slide, please. Yes. I think this is my last slide, actually. So in terms of resource implications, because of the COVID-19 risks, now we all know that wearing face masks, wearing face shields, using more of IT, physical distancing, this may warrant the need for additional resources. Or we may need to recruit new local consultants because international consultants cannot travel to most countries. So these may have implication for resources. For projects under implementation, under preparation, we suggest that you include additional time and resources for requirements such as these. And especially for the projects where certain activities have been shifted to post-project approval, post-board approval, then there should be enough time and budget allocated to fulfill and complete the pending safeguard activities. For projects under implementation, of course, variation orders may need to be issued for existing consultants and prepare scope change memos. These are all sort of internal ADB documentation requirements. But whatever is the case, we recommend that ADB staff discuss this clearly with the executing agency and implementing agency and agree on the additional resource needs, adjustments in the project processing timeline, and move forward based on a mutually agreed basis. Next slide, please. I think this is it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive and interesting presentation, which does show that we need indeed to adapt processes to this pandemic, and the risk-based approach is very timely. And based on experience here in China, the capacity of the EA is a key risk criteria which we are considering, and also the real need to hire national consultant is something that has proven very successful in the China case. But we will discuss this more later on. Thank you for all the examples on alternative methods. This will be indeed the topic of the next presentations. We have for you a presentation from Deepak and then from the EA and the contractor to tell us the real examples from the field, from Nepal. Deepak, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Margia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and warm namaste to all from Kathmandu. Thank you, organizers, for kindly giving us this opportunity to present how ADB-funded projects in Nepal had struggled, yet continued with the development activities in the middle of the pandemic. In this about 20-minute session, we'll present a short video that records the chronological information on how the pandemic started, and started to affect the projects, and how the risk was managed by adopting a standard operating procedure that included both preventive, detective, and curative measures. We have two important implementing agencies with us today, belonging to water supply and sanitation, who are working more in an urban context, and the energy development sector, who are working more in a rural context. So they will present their first-hand experience on how their office work closely with the contractors in continuing the work. By following the SOP, the standard operating procedure. The SOP was prepared under ADB support and adopted after joint meeting between employer and contractor on contractual issues. Since SOP implementation also inherited some cost-related issues, the contractor would like to get clear on that, because this is the issue of unanticipated impact or force majeure. So that also needs to be clarified. So all these activities were carried out, and the SOP was successfully implemented. So in the current context of Nepal, with almost 200,000 infected and nearly 1,200 deaths so far because of COVID infection, Nepal is indeed facing a difficult time due to the pandemic. Yet the dedicated hands of the project-related stakeholders, be it employer, be it consultant, or be it contractor, they are doing their best to continue with the development work by taking all the safety measures. With this, let me invite you all to watch and enjoy this short 6-minute video, which sort of consolidates different activities carried out by the ADB office in close coordination with the EA and contractors in preparing the SOP and ensuring to work together to keep on continuing the development work by not stopping the work at all. So with this, let us start the video, please.
The WHO declared COVID-19 pandemic on 11 March 2020. In order to follow the internationally accepted approach to minimize spread of the infection by breaking the chain of contact, Nepal also declared national lockdown on 14 March 2020. As in all sectors of economy, the construction industry also came to a standstill. Government, concluding that development projects should not remain closed for long, directed its agencies on 2nd April 2020 to resume work by following the prescribed safety measures. They lifted lockdown on 21 July 2020, yet the situation continued to be vulnerable. To resume work by adopting the safety protocols defined by the government and international agencies like WHO, ILO, and IFC, a standard operating procedure for COVID risk management at workplaces, coined as SOP, was suggested to be followed. In compliance, numbers of projects prepared SOP as per their understanding, but in varying quality and content. Hence, ADB felt some scale of uniformity in the provisions needs to be maintained.
To form a strategy on how to deal with work resumption, ensuring occupational health and safety in ADB funded projects, NRM Safeguard team conducted a quick survey. From this survey, 67% EIA requested ADB's support on preparation of a standard operating procedure.
Following the request by the EA and contractors, ADB drafted a generic SOP by referring almost 1.5 dozen guide, instructions, and advisories issued time to time by the government and the authorized international agencies. The SOP was prepared with main text having information in brief, and for every key activity, detailed actions were elaborated in the flyers kept in an envelope pasted at the end of the document. NRM extended hand-holding support to the EA and contractors to draft project-specific SOPs.
So this SOP is developed by NRM and it lays down a clear and systematic procedure on prevention, detection and emergency.
Knowing the proactive approach taken by ADB to continue construction work without stoppage even during the COVID, the Society of Economic Journalists of Nepal, SEJON, organized a SOP sharing program and invited ADB, government executing agencies, and contractors to jointly discuss the experience in SOP preparation, implementation, and its effectiveness. Initiating the webinar, Country Director, Nepal Resident Mission, remarked,
"We would like to share what ADB has been doing to ensure workers' safety at project sites and how the SOP prepared by ADB is being implemented at project levels."
In the program, one of the implementing agency related with water supply and sanitation sector, Ms. Lakshmipant, Chief Safeguard Unit of PID, stated how they followed the provision of SOP and instructed the contractors to jointly prepare SOP with them and begin to strictly comply with the provisions.
WHO को गाइडलाइनमा बेस भएर र ADB को सहयोगमा एउटा जर्नल खाले SOP निर्माण गर्यौं.
She mentioned that the SOP prepared jointly with contractor with the support of ADB actually helped them to continue construction work even during the lockdown and the spiking COVID situation by adopting the safety measures. In the meantime, a live case of COVID-19 infection was encountered in one of the major campsites of the project. The contractor informed how the SOP and the orientation provided by ADB and the EA actually helped them to trigger the emergency protocol and effectively undertake the follow-up activities. In another project related with river basin and heritage restoration work, the project director, Mr. Nauraj Pyakurel, informed how they have adopted the ADB-supported SOP and have put that in practice. All these included activities such as screening at entrance, keep the workers in camp, maintain physical distancing, wear masks and gloves, supply food in the camp, and restrict movement of workers out of the camp. His statement was supported by Ms. Sarmila Shakya, the architect and site in charge of the contractor. Following the Saison webinar, the journalists wrote various articles in the national newspaper, magazines, and online media, highlighting the good practice adopted by the executing agency and contractors with ADB support in preparing structured SOP for COVID risk management at workplaces, and how that helped to keep on continuing important construction work without stoppage amid the pandemic. COVID risk looms large, yet construction works are being safely implemented.
In future, we have to put our efforts in generating awareness among the executing and implementing agency and other construction industry related stakeholders that we have to learn to live with the virus. Hence, we must ensure the SOP becomes a part of the occupational health and safety plan of the project and is integrated in the project design with required costing. Thank you. That is the small video that actually consolidates what ADB carried out in very close coordination with EA and contractors in actually ensuring that the construction work doesn't stop. Let us now hear to the first-hand experience from our two presenters, very important presenters actually, one belonging to water sector, as I said earlier, and another to energy. So first I would like to invite Lakshmipant, Chief of the Safeguard Unit of Project Implementation Directorate of Water Supply and Sanitation Office of the Government of Nepal. Lakshmiji, let us be very quick because we have very limited time. So let us try to expedite. Lakshmiji.
Sir, thank you, Deepak sir. Is my slide visible? Shall I start now? There are some efforts. I'm going to present some efforts by PID to continue our work during this COVID-19 period. Here is some actions taken by our agencies to resuming works. First, we sent a letter to the contractors to follow government protocols and gave us updates regarding the staff and laborers, and also prepare a short form of some type of protocol to continue their work. At that same time, we also prepare some COVID risk management awareness materials and distributed to our contractors to keep these materials in their workplaces. At the end of the March, we arranged hand washing and sanitizing station in our office and started to keep recording of visitor with contact address, which is very helpful during contact tracing. At the end of last week of the March, government of Nepal declared countrywide lockdown, and after that 1 week, government instructed to initiate works by following safety protocols. So we need to have arranged official permission for the movement of our consultant and our contractors. Before starting work, we think that we need to have some kind of safety protocol to protect our construction sites and ourselves from this COVID-19 pandemic. So we prepared a generic type of SOP and distributed to the contractors. And at that same time, we formed a COVID-19 committee to give special focus on the implementation of SOP and also provide a timely response to this COVID-19 issue arises in our sites. These are kind of things distributed to the contractors, and contractors are agreed to implement these SOPs on their workplaces and assign their safety officer as a COVID focal person for immediate response. After that, in month of July, ADB prepared a sample SOP and provide orientation to us and consultant contractors. On based of this sample SOP, now we also generate a site-specific SOP because we have two different kind of sites, and so specific SOP is required. Despite of these preventive measures, we have a first COVID case in our one of the wastewater construction site. These are the further action we do perform to continue our work during lockdown period. We do continuous monitoring visit at workplace to how our contractors implement this SOP, and there are provision of the daily status reporting by the consultant contractor regarding the number of laborers and number of staff, and also body temperature of their staffs by virtual means. And at the same time, our safeguard team orient the staff of consultant and contractors to how they implement this SOP in their field by virtual means, and if possible sometime by physical presence. Despite of above actions, we do joint exercise and agreeing with the contractors on additional cost, because SOP implementation need cost. Without the cost, it is not implemented. So we need to agree with the contractors and assure that they will get this cost in their contract by variation or by some other means. During this whole process, we found ADB is very supportive in drafting generic SOP and preparation of the checklist for implementing this SOP, and also suggesting us how to be monitor effectively by using the virtual means. Initially, we prepared a generic SOP which covered these major 3 points. One is the preventive measure. As we know that prevention is better than cure, so we need to focus these preventive measures. For this, we adopt 100% gloves and mask policy, and we focused on the behavioral change of our staffs and workers who are working at that site. And we have a hand washing and sanitizing facility. And we at that time we starting the work in a schedule in a shift. We allow some number of labor to work in a one shift, and then we change another workers at that same time. So there is a less contact of persons, and there is a less chance of occurring this infection. At that same time, we have another provision. We don't mix any new workers with our old or usual workers to protect them for outer infections. Another one is detective measures. In this, we have a mechanism to measure daily body temperature and health screening of the workers, staffs, and any new one who comes in our construction site, and if anyone is suspected, then there is a immediately they go to for COVID testing. And last one is the curative measures. After adopting preventive or detective measures, if anyone get infected with this COVID-19, then we have a COVID rapid response team formed and kept standby in our all work site. And there is a provision of the quarantine and isolation room in camp in case of the confined space construction site. In case of the linear project, we have a contractor have some kind of MOU with the nearby hospitals and hotels to use their hotels room as a quarantine and isolation room. And there is a standby vehicle kept in all sites to transfer if anyone have any serious problem regarding this COVID infection. These are the basically main point focused in our previously prepared SOP. Now, as I earlier told, we have one COVID-19 case in month of the August. Now I'm going to share how we tackle this case. When we informed by our safety focal person, then we have a call immediate meeting by a virtual means through with rapid response team and a PID higher management, and we decided to seal the camp at that time. And after that, contact tracing was carried out. We found that 10 staff in keep close contact with that infected person, so we identified them and immediately quarantined. After that, they were tested for COVID and found negative. This COVID test is again repeated after 14 days and result was again found negative. And we know that there is no workers didn't have a direct contact with that infected person, yet they were also quarantined for 14 days. And after 1 week of this all type of testing, work is restarted within the enclosed work site and camp area. Now, how work is going on in our site, our contractors followed the SOP properly, and we observed that these things are happening in our site to continue the works safely. All site is fenced and guarded, and without entry, no one can permit, even we cannot permit without any permission of that safety officer in their sites. And there is a provision of the temperature measuring and health screening on daily basis of all the staffs, workers, and any another newcomer entering their site. There is a mandatory face mask and use of PPE gloves to make safe them from outsider contamination. And there is a provision of hand washing stations, and there is a disinfection facilities twice in a day to make all the construction sites safer. And there is a provision of the isolation, and few quarantine rooms are kept ready for emergency use in case of the confined space, and in case of a linear space they have a MOU with nearby hospitals. And they also mobilize a full-time safety officer, act as a COVID focal person, and response immediately if there is any COVID cases are found out in their particular site. And there is a provision of the medical room which is established within the campsite, and a vehicle is kept standby for any emergency situation arises. And we are keeping regularly orientation, information, and periodic drills are being carried out time to time to sensitize and create awareness among our contractor consultant. And also this kind of awareness is very useful because we are working in close contact with the community, so we need to also aware the community about this our working procedures and these SOP things. These are some photographs taken during our monitoring visit. There is a health screening is continued. It is a continuous process, and all campsite and work site are properly barricaded. Daily toolbox talk related to their daily activity, and this my orientation of this SOP is carried out even all sites before starting their regular works. And all work area, vehicle, and camp area are well disinfected on the daily basis. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much.
Shall I start? Yeah. Thank you, Lakshmiji. Indeed, a very proactive and timely action that has been taken by PID and your team has been really helpful in actually continuing the work even at the worst situation of pandemic. With this, now I invite the Deputy Managing Director of Nepal Electricity Authority, who heads the Project Management Directorate that implements ADB supported transmission line projects. Manoj sir will quickly contextualize how PMD took measures for supporting their staff in the field to continue the work even during the pandemic, and then that will be followed by a presentation by the project manager of one of the project being implemented, that is SASEC Power Sector Expansion Project. Under that, there is a sub-project Kaligandaki Transmission Line Corridor. He is the project manager, so he will present actually what has happened at the field level. So may I invite Manoj Silwal, DMD NEA. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Deepakji. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear speakers, panels, presenters, and participants. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share our experiences on continuing the work during pandemic. As Deepakji said, along with me, I have my colleague, Mr. Chandan Ghosh. He will present later how he could continue the work in his project site. Well, the country had first case of COVID-19 on 23rd of January 2020. That was a student returned from Wuhan, China. After 2 months, on March 24, government declared countrywide lockdown. Couple of days before this declaration, borders of China was closed. International flights were banned. Restrictions was imposed on travel of the foreigners coming into the country, etc., as measures to control the potential spread of contagious virus. Infected and death cases both were increasing in an uncontrollable manner in USA, Italy, Spain, and in other developed countries. All these had created a havoc among the public, government employees, project offices, contractors, and workers in the site. Lockdown was obvious, but declared bit unexpectedly. As soon as I knew about the lockdown, I communicated with all the project managers and site in charge and advised them, do not panic, follow the instruction of district administration offices and follow the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health and instruct accordingly to the contractor. And as well as I also requested them to support the contractor and their workforces for supply of ration and their daily needs. Myself was logged in home for 3 days. On 4 days, I could manage a vehicle pass and went to office, discussed with my management and convinced them to resume the work at least in substation. I chose substations because of confined working area. There would be no vehicle movement, no public movement, and working there would also be avoiding the imposed lockdown. I asked project manager to initiate discussion with the contractor to resume the works at substation following the COVID-19 safety measures. Contractors agreed to resume the work in substation. Project office and the contractor jointly developed the COVID-19 safety plan. The plan was simple, like taking body temperature, wearing masks, cleaning hands, using sanitizers, maintaining distance, and reporting any kind of discomfort, etc. But to apply it effectively was a big challenge, and awareness as well as discipline among the worker was very important. Ultimately, with the combined effort of project and the contractor, works resumed at the substation, applying COVID-19 safety measures. But personally, I was not feeling good as I was sitting in my office, avoiding people, was having virtual meetings. On the other hand, I was pushing project people and contractors to resume the work at site. For the moment, I evaluated myself a kind of ruthless person. Yes, we had no options. We had to move on. Since then, and we had to move on. since nobody knows how long this pandemic lasts. Since then, I haven't taken a leave for a single day. I cannot think about working from home. If I do so, I feel like I don't have right to ask my project team and the contractor to continue work at project site. After a week of lockdown, the COVID Crisis Management Center decided to allow construction work. Gradually, we resumed the transmission line work, distribution line work, smart metering, and other project works. We have around 30 projects, and we have the work inside more than 100. However, arranging vehicle parks, coordinating with the district administration offices and local government bodies, getting permission for the custom clearance, transportation of the construction materials, and collection of labors were some of the major problems which we overcome successfully. Within a month of lockdown, we resumed works in 90% of the project site. Progress is not expected, but it is satisfactory in this pandemic condition. And all the credit goes to the project team and the contractor who dared to work applying all the safety measures efficiently and in disciplined manner. Yes, we had resumed the work, but we didn't have proper guidelines of this COVID-19 safety, which would address all the safety measures and safety issues. So in the meantime, ADB developed and provided standard operating procedure. I think it's in July. We discussed among the project manager, we discussed with the ADB people as well. Then we have circulated it to all the projects. And this SOP is being applied in all workplaces with the required customization. It is a comprehensive document. It is very useful and practical. I really appreciate the effort of ADB. Not only within the project management directorate, NA is thinking of applying this SOP in all of the projects and offices. One of the projects we had comparatively good progress during this pandemic is Dana Kusma transmission line and associated substations. Soon we will hear from Mr. Chandan how we applied COVID-19 safety measure in the project science and what are the challenges he faced. Considering the time allocated, I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj sir. That was very enlightening, and the kind of concern that you have taken on yourself really proves that how much serious we all are in continuing the development activities in this country. With this, let us invite Chandanji to kindly make his presentation. Chandanji, over to you. Chandanji.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Yes, can you hear? Is my voice audible?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead. Be concise. Thank you.
Is my voice audible?
Chandanji, please go ahead. We are hearing you.
Good. Yeah. Felicitations for the upcoming Diwali festival. I would like to start my slideshow, but my slide is not getting refreshed, maybe due to the bandwidth. So I will start my slideshow from my own view.
यो देखिरहेको छ तपाईले पढ्दै गए हुन्छ चन्दनजी लाइभ भयो
Okay. So a lot has already been said about the border closure and our national lockdown, and there were travel restrictions. Move on to please slide number 3. We followed the major instructions from our administrations, district administrations, but each had their own way of handling the situation, and it was mainly based on the category of infections in that area. But the steps that we took in slide number 4, we obtained passes, as our DMD said, and we adhered to the SOPs, and we, of course, restricted our inter-district movement to the least minimum as much as possible in the initial days. But then it really started. I mean, we had a material crisis, so we applied for passes, and all drivers and workers had to adhere to strict norms and SOPs. And I mean, initially, all the workers started to go home in the situation, in the pandemic situation. But after a month, few wanted to come back and work. So we arranged all the travel advisories and passes, and we initially carried out RDT tests, and that was the test available easily. I mean, through some means. And so all workers who were negative were allowed to come and work, and the administration also helped us in this way. The major advantage we took of the ICT was the inspection of materials in even Europe. In France, we carried out virtual inspections, and we had the materials tested and certified by our consultants and us, and we have those several materials on the way now, and they are reaching. Similar is the situation in goods manufactured in India, and we have faced a little bit of delay in supply of those materials, but still we are able to manage, and it is better late than never. So I should say please let's go to the next slide. Our performance has been satisfactory, and we have been able to achieve good progress, and we will be able to charge our substation by December. I would like to thank the contractor who has worked really hard in keeping their personnel in this difficult situation at site, and continue the momentum that we have seen. Please, next slide, please. So, next slide, please. I think I've already covered most of the aspects. I would like to go to the photographs, and I would like to explain how we have done. We have always adhered and maintained social distancing and used next slide, please. And so we have only permitted workers with negative RDT tests, and maintained hand sanitizing and temperature recording procedures. Next slide, please. And these are the some of the photographs from site, which you may please show. Next slide, sir. So the major challenge is the bandwidth of the internet now. Else, I think we can, and the travel restrictions. So we are virtually carrying out all the possible procedures. In the later part of the substation commissioning, we will be requiring our chief technical experts from India, and that would be a little bit of challenge, but we will hopefully have it done as well. Yes, next photographs, please. These are the disinfections carried out in the camps. And next slide, please.
Make our son perfect!
I think because of I'm working at a very remote location of Nepal right now in Dana substation.
I guess this is the last slide, Chandanji, right? Have we lost him? Okay, maybe we'll stop here. I guess this is the last slide. Adam?
Okay, thank you. I think we can continue. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presenters from Nepal. This has been very, very interesting to hear what Nepal has done in terms of developing timely government protocols, having COVID management plans for contractor at project level, COVID-19 committee. This is quite interesting to hear. There are other countries that have done similar, but as Ms. Lashmi mentioned, it's customization, it's prevention, and I really hope that the case that you have in your project has fully recovered. So before I move on to the next session, that means the panel discussion, I would like to highlight the interest in the guidelines that Karma presented. So ADB will be able to share those guidelines when they are approved internally, and they are an important document that gives a lot of examples and practical tips on how to handle the pandemic. So it will be shared with the EAs and IAs as soon as it's approved. We hope that the approval will be done by the end of the next month. Now, we will move to our panelists and we will hear on specific experiences from other countries in South Asia and from Vietnam in particular, from Steve. What they will, while presenting their experiences, they will share with us some tips on, how to make sure that the proper monitoring and consultation are carried out, when it is advisable to put on hold the project. We have been discussing how we can continue working, but maybe in some situation it is really indeed better to stop working on a project for a couple of months to get ready, get prepared on how to handle the situation. Did we encounter these situations? How the EAs and contractors can take emergency protocol. We heard from Nepal, and that has been very useful. We can hear from other countries if there are similar experiences. We will also try to learn from alternative approaches that come from the use of technology during project implementation. Now, one question already in the Q&A button has been submitted in terms of, okay, we all talk about the use of technology, but what if there is no connectivity in the most rural areas and disconnected areas? So maybe the panelists can discuss that. And one point that was raised by the Nepal presenters is these standard operating procedures, they cost money. We need resources to implement those SOP. So maybe Ricky and Steve can share some experience on that as well. Before going to Ricky, the next speaker, I just maybe a couple of points from my side. I mentioned to you that I am in China, and we experience everything you mentioned, but just a bit earlier. So, for instance, we had both the government and ADB requiring the project management offices to have COVID-19 management plans in place by February 6th. And these plans included preventive measures. Ms. Lakshmi mentioned prevention, and but also the management plan included a very clear accountability system. So if something happens, who is responsible for it? And I think that helped a lot in the Chinese case. We had to acknowledge, although now implementation is back fully, but there were 3 months where on average projects were affected. For 3 months, some projects were put on hold. February, March, April were the hardest months in China. And it was decided that because of the severe shortage of labor in the various provinces because of the travel restrictions, there was no way that contractors could deploy the workers. And so works were stopped for a few months. In those 2 months, though, the project management offices got ready with the use of technology. And also they decided to hire labor from the same province and also engaging local consultants. This was mentioned by several speakers. Engaging local consultants seems to be a very important tool in this pandemic situation. And since May, in the Chinese case, processing and implementation have been going very smoothly. I'll stop here and I'll invite Ricky to talk about the South Asia experience.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I hope you can hear me well. I think the key here is, so I have a few slides to talk about the experience, but I'll try to also tackle the questions that have been raised and the things that that you had just discussed to supplement. So I'm from the South Asia Regional Department. I work with DPAC, so our countries are in South Asia. And I just wanted to highlight that, this is really about adaptive management. I remember first joining ADB, that was a very important thing. And I think this has put us to the test, that we really have to adopt and ensure that we are in line with SPS, as Karma said, but to change the way we do things, to ensure compliance, but also safety amidst these extraordinary circumstances. So let me first talk about India. And I have to say, this is really very adaptive because I am in Manila. There is no power. I am in the car and I've plugged in so that I can have power on my phone. So it's really about, using what you have. I thought that was also a very good question. You don't always have all the resources in the right place. Let me talk about India, which is the slide that you're seeing at the moment. And this had been an ongoing project. And we had been using Android-based tablets to collect information. And I just have to say that when you are using technology already, it's very easy to adopt because we were able to modify the questions. When you change the questions, you can do it from the mainframe, and then it can get downloaded onto the surveyors. So the thing here was, how do you implement it? And I just want to go through some key lessons. It's very important to have all the safety measures, as everyone had been saying. It's also important to have preventive and curative. So we put in health insurance. But I'm going to wrap up this slide by saying one of the things that we really learned about this experience, because we had already been doing the survey. COVID happened, so we were continuing it, but we focused a lot on how to ensure that the conduct of the survey would be safe. One thing that we learned along the way is that it's very important that after the survey, protocols are also incorporated. You're not going to have your surveyors and your enumerators just go home without guidelines on what to observe, what to do, etc. Adam, could we move to the next slide? I also want to talk about Bangladesh. Interesting question that you had. What if you don't have the technology? And this is really an important issue. This slide is loaded with a lot of the adoption that we did in the consultation, but I'll focus on one thing. Also in accordance to adaptive management, we had to do hybrids. We had, because also the survey had started, we had telephone numbers of people, and we realized that we could conduct some of the interviews by phone. So this is phone, just audio, no video. And as you can see, I'm not on video now to preserve the bandwidth. So you use what is available. You use speaking to people, but then you also modify it and follow up with focus group discussions on the items that you need more clarity in terms of getting people's feedback. Next slide, please. I moved to grievance redressal. And one of the things that is important is in this environment, it's even more important to ensure that beneficiaries, that affected people know that if they have grievances, what can they do? What would be the approaches? Who can they call? Because they don't see the usual person. Usually we would have people manning kiosks, etc. And I think the lesson here is that information dissemination is very important, and prepping the grievance redress committee meetings, for example, being very transparent and giving advance information. Again, in terms of adaptive management, you have to realize that people have little information. We come in with little information on safety, right? So you have to go through those protocols. So not just grievance redress, but you also have to do a lot of information dissemination to get to the grievance redress. And finally, on my last slide, because I know Stephen also has a lot of experience on this, is that, well, the bank processes continue. Again, we practice, addressing the risks, but we also look at where it's too risky. But for those where the risks can be managed, we proceed. And therefore, review missions are very important. These are mostly done virtually. We've also had experience of doing virtual project walkthroughs, where a consultant who is on site has a video camera to walk through, and we're able to interact with the person. Again, not the most ideal of circumstances, but there are many ways to do adaptive management to ensure that processes are continued. With that, I know we have limited time. Let me stop at that and hand back to you, Marcia.
Thank you, Ricky. I will call Steve on the same type of questions, and please share the experience you have in Vietnam. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Marcia. And I want to build on what Ricky said, specifically on the review missions part. In Vietnam, we have a large portfolio with 40 or so ongoing projects. So this idea of where do we prioritize and how are we going to carry out the review missions, especially during that period of March, April, and May, where there were some brief lockdowns in Vietnam, but we weren't sure how long it would go on for. Vietnam has done a tremendously good job of controlling the pandemic, and there were early guidelines issued by government in terms of travel restrictions and others that were applied by our projects. But during that period of March, April, and May, there were many routine review missions that were coming up. And we thought, well, we can't have staff visiting all of these, and we may not have access to staff consultants for all. So we did a prioritization exercise. And I can say that the first two slides that Karma shared with us were excellent. And they sum up very well how we went about prioritizing projects. That middle column that she showed really says what we absolutely need to know. I know there's many people joining the seminar that have participated in ADB review missions and project preparation, and we typically collect a lot of information. But there are some essential things really that we need to know, and then there's also what's nice and what's interesting to know. While we were preparing for our virtual review mission protocols, what we did was we contacted many different EAs, other staff, and we developed kind of a template for the virtual review mission. Shared that ahead of time with the project implementing agencies and other key staff, informing them, okay, we're going to schedule a review mission a few weeks down the road. This is the information that we need. What resources do we need to collect this? And EAs are typically well organized in Vietnam, but once again, because there could be travel restrictions or just not enough people to go do all the consultations, they were able to engage national civil society organizations, for example, the Vietnam Women's Union and other community-based organizations on the ground that could help with collecting some of the information well ahead of the virtual review mission. We also used video, social media, other types of online applications to collect and transmit data, which worked very well. So this idea of prioritization, but also I'd say probably more intense preparation for review missions than in the past. Trying to get everything we needed before the virtual review mission was collected. And then as follow-up, when things opened up in June and July, when we were able to resume normal review missions, once again, also prioritizing where there were things that really need to get looked at and verified on the ground to ensure that we were compliant with the SPS or with other parts of the project agreements. Those were the review missions that were prioritized once we could start to travel again. Back to you, Marja.
Thank you, Steve. Very, very interesting and, similar process that we went through in China. So to the audience, it's time to hear your view, your questions. I have a couple of questions which I will ask Ricky to answer. Somebody in the audience would like to know about the success story of Bhutan. Can Ricky share some experience from Bhutan? Thank you.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yes, Bhutan has. I'm not very clear on the context of the question, but with regard to COVID, I assume it is why they have successfully prevented COVID. They had very early actions, including prevention of basically flights into Bhutan. And I don't have really many of the details, but I'd like to sum it up from what we have heard, that it's early action, basically, because primarily in Bhutan, the issue is that they do not have the resources to be able to just like other countries, like more other countries, to have very good, curative, to get to the curative stage. So the preventive was the more important thing in terms of their COVID response. So that's what they did, because there were no infections that came in, to ensure that their health facilities would be able to cope. They needed to really do a lot of the prevention. We have had a loan to Bhutan, a counter-cyclical facility that concentrated on building this capacity for future pandemics, as well as dealing with the current pandemic.
Thank you, Ricky. I would like to hear a bit from Karma on the Bhutan experience.
Yes, thank you, Marzia. My pleasure. I'm Bhutanese, so I will be more than happy and very proud to share Bhutan's experience, though I have not been there since the pandemic broke out. So as we all know, Bhutan is a very small country. There's just 750,000 of us. So as soon as the pandemic, and ironically, the first person who was caught with the virus was an American tourist. And the whole country immediately was locked down. And there was a lot of care and attention given to this old man, American man. He was in the hospital in Thimphu, the capital city. And the government immediately put in a lot of measures. And so it has ranged from, restricting flights. So the commercial flights have all stopped. And I think now it's just limited flights have begun. And the government has organized evacuation flights for citizens overseas. And there is a mandatory requirement for everybody that lands in Paro Airport to be quarantined for 21 days in a hotel assigned by the government, which is paid by the government. And then they also test you a couple of times, and depending on the test results, they may follow up with the PCR test or a rapid test, and everything is paid for by the government. So the government has, in the beginning, we thought it was almost overreacting, but then now we realize that it was actually the right path that they took. And that's the reason why the local transmission has been very, very limited. It's just confined to a few of the border areas bordering with India, where there have been a few local transmission, particularly with the vehicles bringing in goods and, doing loading and unloading of goods. So, but that was all contained. And they've also had these declaration of specific local towns and local areas as the red zone, and movement of people out of the red zone. I think this is what they are doing in Australia as well, where it's restricted and everybody is kept under a close watch. And even when you move from one district to another, there is a need for you to quarantine in a hotel in Thimphu. Say you're going from Phuntsholling to Thimphu, you need to quarantine in the hotel, you get tested, and then if your test results are negative, then only you're allowed to go home. So a lot of proactive measures and a lot of patrolling. Yes, the other important thing is because we have a porous border with India, so there are a lot of security personnel that have been mobilized and are literally physically standing along the borders to watch, because there are people still going in and out through the borders. And there is a high risk because a lot of the Indian towns which are neighboring Bhutan are like red zones with a lot of COVID breakout there. So yeah, this is a little bit of experience from Bhutan. Thank you.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you very much. So we have a few more questions. Please, to the audience, don't be shy. There are a lot of experienced speakers. Keep sending the questions. There is one question for the Nepalese presenters on about the virtual mean for procurement from other countries. Can the panelists explain what checklist they followed and if they were different from the normal audit checklist that they were used before COVID?
Thank you, Margia. I think Mr. Chandan Ghosh, Chandanji, maybe you will respond to this question. Because it
is my voice audible?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Basically, we followed the mandatory RDT negative requirement before allowing anybody to enter our sites. And we restricted ourselves to unnecessary gatherings.
Chandanji, in addition, the question is related with how the virtual procurement was done. You talked about procurement being done from France.
We requested the manufacturer to place several cameras and through Teams or through Zoom meetings, we carried out all those virtual inspections, and the results were shown to us. Immediately, and we recorded in our in some forms, and after the inspections were over, the reports were immediately sent to us for signing, and we again scanned it and sent it back, and we carried out major procurement without affecting the even the schedule of the inspections as called by the contractor and the manufacturers. Well, we have little bit of restrictions in virtual inspection of transformers. Else for other and those materials which have functional guarantees issues associated with it. Else, for example, we carried out inspection of STLS conductor in Orissa, but it was mandatory that presence of our consultant represent local quality assurance team witnessed those tests. So apart from those materials which did not have any functional guarantee issues, we have been carrying it out. Even we had one virtual testing yesterday in Vadodara in in Gujarat, and we have one more from the Siemens in Kolkata in November 19 for the VCB vacuum circuit breakers, and we have. It is a bit unaffected the supply. Thank you. I think it answers.
Thank you very much. Actually, yes, also in the China's case, we did suspend the bid openings for a couple of months, and then they were we restarted based on, you know, thanks to technology, and as it was mentioned, through virtual meeting, additional cameras, and so on and so forth. The next question I have is not an easy one. It's about the future for ADB project. How we will, what have we learned from this experience, and how the projects of ADB will change in order to be able to handle another pandemic? Hopefully, no need, but in case, are we ready? Can I have Deepak, Ricky, and Steve to respond to this? Share some thoughts. Thank you.
I guess Ricky.
Go ahead. Okay, I'll go ahead, Deepak. Marcia, yes, I agree with you. That's a very difficult question. So I think ADB, in terms of understanding our processes, I think there has been a lot of thought into. Again, as I said, it's adaptive management, right? But in terms of preparation, we actually are seeing some of our processes that are more resilient, and therefore we should keep those more resilient practices and also adopt the others that might be affected in case that there is in another pandemic. For example, as I was saying, when you do the survey work for involuntary resettlement, the use of the Android-based tools for data collection, this is something that we started even before the pandemic, but this proved to be more resilient than, for example, paper-based questionnaires. Because, for example, if you had to change because you had to reduce the questionnaire, that wasn't possible with a paper-based. There was also a lot more contact with a paper-based. The Android devices also ensured that we could take documentation like photographs, etc. And so I know this may sound very trivial, but actually exposure is also related to the number of things that you come into contact with. There has also been a lot of pioneering work with 3D cameras so that there will be no big exposure on survey sites. So what the 3D camera does is that if I take a picture of an affected household's house and I'm trying to, measure it, traditionally we would whip out a meter, and start looking at how many meters, the length and the width, so that you understand how you will be compensating the person. Now you can take a picture, and with software, it translates into the floor plan. And of course, a picture will be something that you can go back to. Before COVID, we were used to making second rounds of interactions with affected people, and these kinds of technologies will reduce that. So I think we're looking at resilient technologies that are not necessarily only because of the pandemic, but is actually an improvement that will become more resilient. Maybe I can pass on to the other speakers.
Yeah, I mean, someone coming from a resident mission, I know you're in a resident mission, Marja, and myself, I'm in Vietnam and have worked in others. I think the pandemic has shown us, and there'll be more of an emphasis on, resourcing the resident missions and using local resources in the field to be able to more intensely participate in project preparation, implementation and monitoring. So, yeah, we've really seen that, this emphasis on the resident mission staff, but also on, identifying good rosters of staff consultants and continued capacity building for executing and implementing agencies to take on, an even stronger role in project preparation and implementation. On a wider picture, and not narrowly looking at only ADB operations, but, what we've really learned is that early actions to prevent and control the spread of COVID or other communicable diseases is tremendously important. And what we've seen in many of our countries in Asia and the Pacific, they've done a very good job at these travel restrictions, but also social distancing, contact tracing, hygiene, and others that have paused some of our project monitoring or preparation activities. But we've seen most countries have been able to, after a short period, resume that and continue delivering the development outcomes that as planned.
Yeah, if I may supplement on that, Majia, probably that is why we are calling it a new normal, because this is something that should be put into practice, and the system should run. It should not be on an ad hoc basis. For example, if we become project specific, probably it is the procurement is the right time when we have to integrate these requirements in the procurement documents, so that the contractor, employer, contractor, consultant all agree, and so certain all are on the same page, and the compliance is carried out. So probably in the contract agreement document, in the bill of quantity, the activities should be there, and proper costing should also be there, so that contractor knows what needs to be done and how much they are getting paid while for carrying out those activities, and then only those things can happen at the field. So it is the system that should run, and probably it is time PBFD has rightly organized this program. This is the right time. Probably they will try to integrate SOP requirements with the OHS now, so it becomes an integrated system. So this is only point I would like to add.
Thank you very much. This is indeed very, very relevant. And I just to add to what Steve mentioned on the resident missions point of view, indeed, what we have observed is that it seems that it's more difficult for HQ administered project to recover in terms of implementation, despite the technology and the use of Zoom and WeChat in China, and it seems that it's more efficient for a resident mission administered project. This is maybe a lesson that we can reflect upon and see how to move forward as an institution. Also, the fact that we are in a new normal. I mean, this pandemic has had the steepest learning curve ever for everybody. And for instance, in PRCM in China, Beijing, we did the COVID management plan overnight in early February. And so this, I think, will be something that, as Deepak mentioned, will be integrated in the future, and we have learned now how to do it. It won't cost much effort to integrate it in the new projects. On this, but in terms of resources, more questions are coming for the resources. So I think this could be also a lesson on we need to include in our costing some the resources for emergency plan, which probably we consider under contingency usually, but maybe now this has to take a new dimension for our projects in the future. Can I hear anything from the speakers on these cost resources? How have the project handled this resource issue, where the additional cost due to the equipment, the SOPs, where the money have come from? Maybe Nepal project director can tell us something about it. And Ricky, if you want to add something.
Lakshmiji, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to share some of my experience during fixation of this cost related to SOP implementation. When we go to implement this SOP and ask to contractor to implement, then they have a first question: where is the cost of this implementation? I think there is lot of items which is already included in their OHS BOQ, so we don't need to give separately these items, but some of our items as COVID related insurance and costs related to COVID checking are new, and we also provided this cost by them through variation of their contract, because we have a provision in our contract document, and now in case of ongoing project we can't go beyond our contracts. We need to do based on our contract, we need to provide them something cost which is included, which is not included in their BOQ by variation. And in case of new contract, we can, as earlier Deepak sir said, that we need to put these item in their BOQ, so this kind of confusion and argument is not arises during the implementation phase. So I think this is the better idea to implement SOP properly in our construction site.
Thanks. And Marcia, if I may come in, I think I agree. I think there has been very good experience in Nepal. And moving forward, I think we should incorporate those costs. But just to explain the slide that I provided in India, for example, the first slide, that was a survey, a team of surveyors. So their contract had to be varied. And that the cost of that ended up being close to double the original cost estimate. The variation was almost 100% increase. It's because we had to adapt, right? We had a system that was, quote unquote, non-COVID proof, and you had to make it COVID proof. And tying into moving forward, I think that's what we have to work on to make sure that these are accounted for, factored in, and we have more resilient systems.
Thank you, Lakshmiji and Ricky. I would like to switch on a topic on technology. So we often look at the positive side of technology. For instance, I can tell you in the China case for our projects, there are very positive impacts with the use of technology, and that this will also be reflected in our new project, the way we do business in our future project. For instance, we observe that there is much more communication between the government team, the EA team, and the ADB team. There is more flexibility in terms of review missions, and there is also increased efficiency for, again, the resident mission administered projects. Now, can I ask the panelists if there is any negative impact that they observed during this pandemic from the use of technology? The Deputy Managing Director mentioned the lack of personal interactions. I think we all relate to that. Instead of being in a screen, it would have been nice to be in a big room all together. But apart from that, any negative impact on our way we implement projects or design projects due to the use of technology?
Maybe I can start, Marcia, because I was talking about the technology that we are using. I have to echo what you said. Efficiency has been one of the positives. I think we are more circumspect in some ways. We mute the mic, we turn on the mic, we let people take turns. And you want to be concise because of bandwidths and time, etc. But from a social safeguards perspective, there have been negative things, but my view is that these things require behavior change and a lot of information dissemination. For example, there is a bit of mistrust on the technology, for example, and how it will be stored, where it will be used. A very simple thing, we are using Android, for example, we're using Android tablets, and one of the things that we are asking is that they sign on the Android tablet. And they have discomfort with that. They feel that they would like to sign on paper, right? But this would have been a better capture. Some of the questionnaires would also end in a recording to say, I have participated in the questionnaires, and the answers that I have provided are correct, etc. So there's mistrust in that, and how these things will be kept, and also how these things will be used. But we go to some lengths to explain that actually it should not be so different from paper in terms of what it will be used, and we explain to them safe storage of this data and the security aspects. But yes, I think because it's all new, it will take time for people to adjust, to adapt, to be able to ease their concerns because we have addressed their questions.
Marcia, I just want to build on that a little bit, is that technology has been amazing for efficiency, right? Which efficiency in some ways translates to speed. We need to counterbalance that. We talk about meaningful consultations with stakeholders in the field, and if it's being done through VideoCon, if it's being done through well, we're on Zoom, so I'll use a Zoom engagement or others. Meetings tend to start right on time. They tend to want to finish right on a certain point, and we're unable to pick up some nuances of body language and others. So for the people conducting meaningful consultations over a video environment, I think that's probably really a skill that we're developing in order to get that good comprehensive information and really have meaningful consultations. There needs to be a balance between the speed the technology allows that to happen. Now, that can also be a positive because it could be a convenience where we can come back and probe and meet people individually. But I think there really needs to be that's something that needs to be looked at in terms of, can we really do good, meaningful consultations in a video engagement, in a video setting.
And if I may add, Marzia?
Yes, Karma, go ahead.
Yes, I think this is not so much with regard to negative impact of technology per se, but I think this is more got to do with our heavy dependency on technology going forward, because there are still a lot of areas of countries where the internet connection is not so good. There are certain groups within our affected communities that do not have access to smartphones or cannot afford to have smartphones. So there is that constraint. And I think then somehow some important groups of people, they may get excluded. Of course, we do need to then make the extra effort of finding other ways to reach out to these other groups of people. But I think that is one of the backdrops where it's harder to reach certain, groups of people. It could be like indigenous peoples living in some kind of, tropical forest or something like that. It's a little bit harder. So I think that's one of the challenges when we are too dependent on technology. Thank you.
Just to supplement on that, Majia, I totally agree with what Karmaji said. In the remote areas, we really need to look also at the country context. Like a country like Nepal, which is a very hilly and mountainous country and very remote areas, projects are being implemented there. So the question of connectivity, one is that. Secondly, at times when we talk about environment, it is the overall, we have to look at the overall context, the inter-reality, the interlinks between different aspects, that is generally missed when we do it virtually. And sometimes we only get very cosmetic visuals, what the contractor or the consultant at site want to show us. We can only see that. We cannot really interrelate on, so certain thing has happened and why that has happened. We have to look at the overall context, and that overall context is generally missed during the virtual monitoring. This is one of the difficulties we are facing. Over to you, Majia.
Thank you, Deepak. And I have to apologize. The discussion was so interesting that I didn't realize it's way past the time of our session. So let me just thank you very much to the presenters, the panelists, the participants who asked very difficult questions. I won't summarize because it's such a rich session, but I hope you all took some interesting tip and experience from other countries that will be useful for you in the near future. With that, I will close the session and thank you very much to everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for participating in this session. We will have a 2.5-hour break. We hope you use the time to network with other participants in this forum. We've also prepared a game to make learning and networking fun and useful for you. Go to the Games and Quizzes page to access it. And don't forget to post your key takeaways from this forum in social media using the hashtag #RiseBeyondCovid. See you back online at 2:30.